dam situation. You said that you're still assessing who's responsible, but can you say in your conversations with the Ukrainians what they're telling you in terms of what additional aid they might need to respond to this situation? And will the president be discussing it with Prime Minister Sunak tomorrow? And then separately, is there any plan at all for the president to talk to President Zelensky? And if not, why not?
So, of course, Ukraine is going to be at the top of discussion tomorrow. It is NATO, and as you know, the NATO alliance has been strengthened because of the president's leadership. And so, of course, Ukraine and Russia will be top of mind and discuss. I'm not gonna go into details of what they're going to be talking about. Certainly, we'll have a readout that will lay more of the conversation. I don't have any specifics to share on what the conversations that were had with Ukraine in regards to the dam. I could just tell you we've been in touch and we're ready to help in any way that we can. Just don't have a list of what they're asking for or what was discussed.
And then on a separate topic, a couple months ago we were all talking about TikTok, and there was legislation put forward on the Hill that 3 months ago Jake Sullivan came out in support of, and then we haven't really heard much since. Can you say whether you're working at all with the Hill on making this become law? Are you working with the Senate, the House, or have you sort of given up on any authority to restrict TikTok and other apps that you think are harmful?
Look, certainly this is important to the president, to the administration, this type of legislation that Jake talked about a couple months ago. Don't have an update for you. We are always in constant contact on different pieces of legislation with the House and the Senate. I just don't have an update on where we are currently with this particular legislation.
Thanks, Karine. So Walgreens unveiled a new look for their stores. They unveiled that in Chicago, and it has basically everything locked up, in part because of the theft that they've seen. Recent study shows that 50% of retail workers have seen some sort of retail theft, and another nearly 50% are afraid to go to work. So is the president aware of retail theft, and how come the problems become so pervasive under his tenure?
So look, what I can tell you is, unlike congressional Republicans, the president has taken action. He has taken action to deal with the crime, hiring police officers. You've seen that from his actions that he's taken to cut crime. And and it started with the American Rescue Plan. The American Rescue Plan had billions of dollars that went into communities to hire police officers to make sure that we had accountability as well on the ground. And let's not forget his Safer American Plan to fund the police and invest in crime prevention. So we have taken actions. We have made sure that we do everything that we can to try and protect communities and to make sure that police officers are hired. And so, look, instead of Congress, passing legislation or wanting to cut or defund the police, we're doing the opposite. And so we would love to work with Congress and see how else we can be helpful to communities. But the president has taken action. Again, the American Rescue Plan, the Safer Communities, America Plan, and he's going to continue to do what he can to make sure that we keep communities safe.
I want to ask you quickly about the visit tomorrow. The United Kingdom left the EU in 2020. The UK remains our closest ally, or one of our closest allies, as you said. How come we're not negotiating a trade deal with them?
So look, I think in that conversation that they'll have tomorrow, for sure, the economy will be part of that conversation. Look, they have the largest bilateral investment relationship in the world when you think about the UK and United States, and that's a source of strength and has been an important foundation of economic growth over the years in both of our countries. And so I'm sure when the two leaders meet, they will continue to take steps to deepen that economic partnership. And so I'm not going to get ahead of what the president and the prime minister are going to speak to. But again, they have one of the largest bilateral investment relationship in the world. And I think that matters.
Is the president comfortable with the UK leading on artificial intelligence? Because that's one of the things the prime minister is.
Look, I'm not going to get ahead of what they're going to discuss. I've laid out what we have done here and how we see moving forward on artificial intelligence. But again, I'm just not going to get ahead of it. We'll have a readout tomorrow.
You mentioned the governments, U.S. and Canada, working together, talking about the wildfires. But has President Biden spoken with Prime Minister Trudeau about this? any offers of anything different that has not already been offered, or long-term plans they've been discussing?
So I can tell you this, our Deputy National Security Advisor, Liz Sherwood-Randall, has been in touch with her counterparts, and she has been since last week, in offering it and listening to them and making sure we're offering any assistance that they might need. We mentioned the 600 plus firefighters and personnel that we have provided to Canada to help them deal with this wildfire. I don't have a call to read out between the Prime Minister and the President. We've also, as I mentioned, been in touch with governors and local government as well to make sure that we are offering any assistance that they might need.
Can I also just ask, is the President watching some of the pushback from kind of more conservative Republicans in the House regarding the debt ceiling, though they're concerned? Does he have any thoughts about that effort, and also how it might impact future dealing with the House?
Look, and I mentioned this last week, even earlier this week, the President has signed more than 350 bipartisan pieces of legislation, signed them into law. And I think that shows how the President has been able to work with Congress in a bipartisan way. And I think that's important. And we hope that continues, because there's so much more that needs to be done as far as lowering costs, making sure the wealthy pay their fair share. There's a list of things that we would love to work in a bipartisan way with Congress. And so the President, certainly, he's an optimist. He believes that we can continue to do that work, and certainly we're going to try. As it relates to what Congress is saying, or congressional Republicans are saying, look, this was a bipartisan, fiscally responsible piece of legislation. It was important to the American people. We believe they are the ones that won, because we were able to protect some of the programs that they truly need just to make ends meet. We're able to protect all of the historic pieces of legislation that the President put forward to deal with an economy that doesn't leave anybody behind. So the President is very proud of what he was able to do with Speaker McCarthy and the other leaders, and we hope that type of bipartisanship continues. Certainly, I'm not going to get into hypotheticals on how that's going to look down the road, but we have a record. We have a record in the last 2 years to show that we have been able to get that done.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you about, we are 2 weeks away from the state visit. Secretary Austin was in Delhi this week, and I guess there's some other high-profile visits happening between them now and then. Would defense be an important part of the discussions with Prime Minister Modi and President Biden?
Say that last part.
Would defense be an important part of discussions between the two leaders?
Oh, defense. So, look, I don't have anything more to say at this time about the visit. As we get closer, certainly we will have more to share. What I've said is the upcoming visit, we believe, will affirm the deep and close partnership between the United States and India, and the warm bonds of family and friendship that link Americans and Indians together. So that is incredibly important. The Prime Minister and the President will discuss ways to strengthen our two countries, shared commitment to free, open, prosperous, and secure Indo-Pacific, and our shared resolve to elevate our strategic technology partnership, including defense. So that certainly will be talked about in clean energy and space, but I'm just not going to get into details on what the particulars will be. And as we get closer to June 22nd, we'll certainly have more to share.
Also, have the guest list gone out for the state dinner and the welcome ceremony? How big?
So as you know, we've done this will be our third state dinner. We usually don't release those guest lists until closer to the date, and so I suspect that we will do the same process with this.
Sense of number of people?
I don't have a number to share.
And has the First Lady decided the menu and the entertainment?
I don't have anything to share. What is today? It's like so early. We still have about 2 weeks left, and that's plenty of time. And that's like multiple years in these types of administration and presidential administrations. So as soon as we have more to share, we certainly will. But I wouldn't expect that it will happen before the week of the actual event. Okay, John.
Thanks a lot, Karine. Yesterday, the World Bank issued a report in which they indicated that the global economy is slowing down dramatically. They're forecasting an annualized rate of growth of just 2.1% for this coming year. Is that something that you agree with? You see the U.S. economy similarly slowing down at a substantial rate?
So I haven't seen the report. Certainly I have to talk to our economist about the report that you're speaking to. What I can share with you is what we're doing here and how we think it is going to be important to strengthening the global economy, right? In making sure that the debt limit was dealt with. I think that was an important way to dealing with the global economy, having a bipartisan, important budget negotiation that was clearly signed into law. That is incredibly important, making sure we're protecting jobs, protecting retirement accounts for Americans, which is what the president was able to do, making sure people stay on their health care, and protecting other incredibly important programs like veteran programs, for example, Social Security, Medicare. So because of the work that this president has done the last 2 years and just most recently, we are in a better place with our economy, with the American economy. I would have to speak to the economist about this particular piece of data that you're sharing.
The economy's been incredibly resilient. Do you expect that to continue over the course of the remainder of this year? And what is it that this White House can do to prevent this slowdown in the economy, given the fact that there is a divided Congress?
So look, and you're right, the U.S. economy has been very resilient, and that is a lot because of the actions that this president has taken. And making sure that we turned the economy around from when he walked in. As you know, it was a crisis. And so we've been saying this. We've been saying that we believe that we're transitioning to a more steady growth, stable growth, and that's what we're seeing when you look at the job numbers that come out every month, and that's what we believe we're headed to. And so the president's certainly going to continue to do. He's going to now implement those historic pieces of legislation where it's going to create more jobs, and it's going to help continue to make sure that the economy stays resilient.
The minority leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, has said that the budget caps for defense spending in the budget agreement are insufficient to meet the challenges as it relates to Russia, Iran, China. Does the president share those concerns, and does the president intend to submit any sort of supplemental spending package as it relates to either pumping up defense spending or specifically providing additional military assistance for Ukraine?
So as the president said last week, and I'll quote him, he said, if there's any existential need for additional funding, I have no doubt we'll be able to get it. That's what the president said when the budget agreement was done. We have been grateful for the widespread bipartisan support for Ukraine and expect that to continue. And so it doesn't rule out, the budget agreement does not rule out additional emergency funding, whether it is for Ukraine or extreme weather. And so the president is very confident on that. As you know, there's now an appropriations process, as Director Young spoke to. Certainly not, we are now back in regular order, right, which is why it was important about getting this budget agreement done. So I'm going to let the appropriation process move forward, not going to get ahead of that, but the president, as he stated himself, he's confident.
So more generally speaking, he is okay with where the budget caps are for defense spending?
Look, there's an appropriations process that's going to get going. That is regular order. That is where we're supposed to be. We're going to let that process go. As you're asking me about more defense funding, as the minority leader, as you just stated, feels like there's not enough in defense. The president has said if there is need, existential need to additional funding, he believes that we will get there. So that's what I can share with you on that part. Let me see. Go ahead, Alex. I haven't called on you in a while.
Hi, Karine. The United States, as you know, has far higher incidence of car fatalities, both of drivers and pedestrians, cyclists, than almost all other wealthy nations. And we're about to enter the most dangerous time of the year for car accidents, the summer months. Has this administration done enough on that front? Or has maybe the automotive, the highway lobby sort of had its way as it has had with many other administrations?
So look, and you're right. We face a crisis here in America when it comes to driving, drivers, passengers, pedestrians, cyclists. Each year, more than 40,000 people die in these types of crashes, and so and this is comparable to gun deaths, and it should not be this way. So the Department of Transportation launched a national roadway safety strategy in early of 2022 to tackle this type of crisis at every level. And so while it's encouraging to see the death level has kind of the death leveling off, somewhat in the last 2 quarters, because we have seen that occur. It is no time to let up, and so we're going to, DOT is going to continue to take major steps to keep people safe, and I think that's important. Again, they've put a plan together to try to tackle this incredibly unfortunate situation. Okay.
I know you won't comment on the case involving the president's son, but the president previously criticized the Supreme Court ruling that his legal team is preparing to use, should he be charged, as an affront to common sense and the Constitution. I just want to know if that statement from June of last year still holds, or if he is viewing that ruling in a new light.
I'm just not going to comment on this.
And on the merger, the Wall Street Journal editorial board said this is more than just a private deal. It's really about MBS sort of thumbing his nose at the president. They point out that the Saudis entered a China brokered deal with Iran. They are cozying up to Maduro, cut oil production ahead of Blinken's visit, helping Russia, driving up prices, hurting Biden. And they write, is Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman trolling President Biden? Call it the revenge of the pariah.
I can't comment to or lay out what the thinking of the Saudi Arabia official or government are. As it relates to this merger, we're just not going to comment on this deal. It is 2 private entities, and we're just not going to comment.
Does that risk making the president look weak if there's no comment? When you have Democratic senators saying that the president's Justice Department should be looking at this with respect to antitrust questions, foreign registration questions, doesn't no comment fall short?
First of all, the president does not look weak. This is a president, because of his leadership, has brought together our allies and partners again, which certainly was our foreign policy relationship with heads of states was gutted and destroyed by the last administration. And this is a president that has been able to strengthen NATO alliance again because of his leadership, has been able to bring more than 50 countries together to help support Ukraine as they're battling the aggression from Russia. And that is occurring because of this president's leadership. And so I think that is important. And because we're saying that we're not going to speak to a private merger, a company's merger, a private entity, does not make the president weak.
He was briefed on it, though, right?
It does not make the president. Of course, he's going to be briefed on it. He's the president of the United States. But does not. But we're not going to comment on it because it is a private entity. We've been consistent. We've been consistent. He's the president of the United States. He gets to know everything that's going on in the world and in the country, right? That is important for him to know. He's one of the leaders of the free world.
To get briefed on private.
All right, I've answered your question. We're going to move on. Go ahead, Courtney.
Thank you. Will the president withdraw his nomination of Dale Ho for a judgeship in the Southern District of New York? Today's cloture vote in the Senate was canceled.
So the president is proud to have put him forward, and we're going to continue to support his nomination.
Do you have an expectation of when another vote will be scheduled?
I don't have a timeline on when that vote will happen. I can tell you that the president continues to support.
So much. I have 2 questions about events at the White House tomorrow. Firstly, on the Sunak visit, the Prime Minister has echoed some of President Biden's strong words on Taiwan. So I'm wondering if the 2 leaders are going to discuss related China issues like investments, semiconductors, supply chains. And is it a priority for the administration to get U.S.-UK alignment on these issues?
Just not going to get ahead of their conversation tomorrow. I just laid out what they're looking forward to particularly discussing. This is the 4th time that they've met in 4 months. And it is our closest relationship, an important relationship, especially as we talk about Ukraine and the war in Ukraine. That was clearly an aggression by Russia. I'm just not going to get into specifics of what they're going to speak about. I talked about the economy, I talked about Ukraine, and clean energy, which is going to be incredibly important, but just not going to go into any more specifics, and we'll certainly have a readout.
Then moving on to the Pride event tomorrow, this is likely to provoke some political or politicized pushback, especially from some of the states that have passed legislation targeting sexual minorities, or from countries that have done the same. So could I just hear from you, why does the White House feel that this event is important, especially in this context?
So we've had multiple events celebrating the LGBTQ+ community, multiple. This is a president that has been a strong ally, a vice president that has been a strong ally, a second gentleman, a first lady that's been a strong ally of the community. And it is important, he feels it is important, they feel it is important to lift up a community, to lift up their accomplishments and what they've been able to do for the community. And so we think it's an important moment. And let's not forget what we're seeing across the country from state houses. More than 600 pieces of legislation, anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. A few hundred of those are against transgender youth. And so we have not seen that type of anti-sentiment, against this community in decades. And so we believe that not only does this community need to be celebrated and continue to be celebrated, as he's done many times before in this past 2 years, but we also need to make sure that we let the community know that the president has their back, and we're going to continue to fight for them. And so that is important. I think that is important to be able to bring a couple of thousand Americans here to the White House to let them know that this president is going to continue to fight for them. And that's the message that we want to make sure that gets out there. Okay, go ahead.
On the issue of asylum seekers arriving in New York, recently Governor Hochul and New York City Mayor Adams, press called upon the federal government, the Biden administration, to somehow work on relaxing some of the work permitting requirements, easing restrictions so that some of these asylum seekers can get their work permits before this 6-month waiting period. I'm wondering if the White House has any update on that, any, just stance on those discussions?
So I don't have any updates on the work requirements. I know that's been in the news for some time now. What I will say is that we have had direct communications and conversations with these interior cities and states who are dealing with an influx of immigrants in their city and in their state. And we've had multiple conversations, not just with New York, but also Chicago and other interior cities and states. And what I will say is that we have offered assistance and resources. I have announced, and it's been announced not just by me, but by DHS, the more than 200 million, I believe more than 300 million of resources to those particular interior states. And also, I have even said this yesterday, that a large piece of that has been provided to New York. And so we're going to continue to have those conversations. We're going to continue to assist the best way that we can, as we have been doing for the past several months. Go ahead, Owen, in the back.
Good afternoon, Karine. In Chicago, over Memorial Day weekend, over 50 people were shot, several killed in separate incidents. And I know that you discussed the action this administration has taken to try to reduce gun violence, but I want to know what the president has to say to individual Chicago residents living in neighborhoods where bullets are flying and can't wait for laws to take effect. What the president would tell that person.
We will say that we are doing everything that we can to make sure their communities are safe. And the president, and it's not just our words, our actions show that. The president signed into more than 24 executive actions to deal with gun violence. And the president has also continued to call on Congress to take additional action. We are very proud of the bipartisan piece of legislation on gun violence to fight gun violence that was signed just about a year ago. And that was something that we had not seen in 30 years. And because of the president's leadership, we were able to get that done. The president also has made clear that Congress needs to do more. And so he's taken action, and certainly our hearts go out to families or individuals who have lost loved ones. It is devastating to see when you hear a statistic where guns are what is taking the lives of our children, the #1 killer of our children. That's devastating to hear. That is something that the president wants to prevent and wants to deal with, which is why he took those actions. So we're going to continue to call on Congress to take action, and I will say, and we'll be very loud about that and very clear about that. And I will also say again, our hearts go out to folks who have lost loved ones to gun violence. Go ahead, Brian.
I wanted to ask about Ukraine and NATO. The British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, last week said that Ukraine's rightful place is in NATO. Will this be something that the two discuss when they meet tomorrow?
Look, I'm not going to get into specifics of what's going to happen. Again, I know you guys have asked me a couple of questions, but our commitment to NATO's open door policy stands, and so just not going to get ahead of that.
Given the meeting tomorrow and that the NATO Secretary General is going to be here on Monday, is President Biden thinking about a renewed push toward Ukraine's admission into NATO?
I mean, nothing has changed of how we've answered this question before. An alliance decision is between the 31 allies and an aspirant country. That's how it's dealt with. There's a process, and there's an open door policy. That's what we support. We've supported that for some time now, but right now we are focused on making sure that Ukraine has everything that it needs to fight Russia's aggression. And you heard us just about last week announce another PDA of $300 million. We're going to continue to do that every other week or so and continue to show our support for Ukraine, whether it is aid or systems. And we've done that the last 15 months. And so we're going to do everything that we can to support the Ukrainian people as they fight in an incredibly impressive and brave fight. All right.
Can I just clarify one thing? You said repeatedly here that the White House didn't want to comment on a private entity. A quick search back through briefings in recent months finds that you commented on J.P. Morgan's merger or purchase of First Republic, and then you were asked last November about Elon Musk buying Twitter, saying we're going to keep an eye on that decision. Does the decision to not comment today have anything to do with the fact that the Secretary of State is in Saudi Arabia right now?
No, not at all. Not at all. We're just not going to comment on this. And look, I also said with the Elon Musk, I also said the same thing that I said today, is that we're not going to comment on a private entity. I actually said those words as we talked about Elon Musk and Twitter. And so that's going to continue. We're not going to comment on this. We're going to focus on the American people. We're going to focus on what their needs are as it relates to American families and as it relates to abroad and also the Middle East as well. And so that's the president's focus right now. But I've always been very clear. We just are not going to comment on any types of mergers. And I know you pulled out those specific things, but I also continued and said I'm just not going to comment on mergers or private entities.
Over LGBTQ, but go to Saudi Arabia where gays are being killed. You have to stop the discrimination.